November 21, 1916, Kia Channel, Aegean Sea. The blast hits before anyone hears it. A dull, metallic crack shudders through the hull of HMHS Britannic, rising through the decks like a living thing, vibrating metal, quaking beams, wrenching steel. For a heartbeat, the Aegean Sea falls silent. Then the ocean inhales. Water roars into the lower compartments, sweeping stretchers, medical crates, and men aside in a violent surge. The smell of burning fuel mixes with the salt air as alarms begin to scream across the great white ship. Violet Jessop already knows what has happened, even before the officers shout it. She had heard this sound once before, and it had never left her. Her hands freeze for half a second around the stack of folded blankets she was carrying for the morning rounds. But the paralysis breaks like a snapped wire. Training takes over. She drops the blankets, grabs the rail, and races toward the forward companionway. Wind tears across the deck. Lifeboat crews shout orders that drown beneath the grinding list of the wounded vessel. Nurses clutch railings to keep from sliding as the ship begins to tip, just a few degrees, but enough. Enough to signal that Britannic is mortally wounded. Violet pushes past a line of stewards arguing with a surgeon about evacuation protocols. She doesn't stop. That is not her place, not when she knows exactly where she needs to be. The ward. Her patients. The moans of injured soldiers roll through the corridor like a low tide. The lighting flickers overhead, then steadies. Violet closes the distance in a sprint, the hem of her apron snapping around her ankles. Inside the ward, chaos is blooming. A corporal with bandaged ribs struggles to sit up, panic in his eyes. Two orderlies are trying to lift a stretcher containing an unconscious lieutenant. The deck vibrates with another deep metallic groan. "Easy, easy," Violet says, her voice steady but loud enough to break through their fear. "We're evacuating, you'll be outside soon, follow my voice." Another explosion rumbles through the hull, this one softer, a collapsing bulkhead perhaps. Dust rains from the overhead beams. A glass saline bottle shatters near her boots. Someone cries out for help. Someone else screams that the ship is tipping too fast. And beneath it all, Violet feels it again, that creeping déjà vu tightening against her spine. The memory of another ship, another night. Another sinking. She had lived through the horrifying descent of the RMS Titanic 4 years earlier. She had stood on its slanted deck, guiding terrified passengers into lifeboats while the great steel giant groaned in its death throes. She had watched the black water rise up and swallow the bow. And before that, she had survived the violent collision involving RMS Olympic, thrown from her bunk as the ship shuddered under the impact. 3 ships. 3 disasters. And here she was again. But none of that mattered now, not to her, not when men who couldn't walk were depending on her comms. Violet grabs the handles of a stretcher. "Help me lift him," she orders an orderly already bending her knees. To the starboard deck, lifeboats are launching there. Another nurse takes the corporal by the arm. "Hold on to me," she tells him, guiding him toward the slanting hallway. The water reaches the lower deck already. She hears it, a violent slosh echoing up the corridor. The ship lists again, harder now, and Violet braces her shoulder against a wall to keep the stretcher steady. Emergency lighting flashes red. Somewhere above, officers shout that the lifeboats on the port side are impossible to lower, they'll be crushed by the still-spinning propellers. Violet doesn't want to think about what that means for the evacuation. She focuses on one breath, then another. One step, then the next. They reach the stairwell leading topside, now crowded with soldiers clutching bandages and crutches, some leaning heavily on one another as they inch upward. Violet's gaze scans the wounded, pale faces, clenched jaws, blood-soaked uniforms. Every single one of them is counting on the nurses not to break. "Keep moving," an officer shouts, "starboard boats only." Salt air blasts their faces as they step onto the open deck. The Aegean sun is painfully bright against the tilting horizon. Several lifeboats already skim the water, packed bow to stern with wounded men and medical staff. A terrified private reaches for Violet. "Miss, please, are we going to make it?" She meets his eyes, steady, grounded, professional. "Yes," she says, "but only if you do exactly as I say." He nods. And in that moment, standing on the deck of her third doomed ship, Violet Jessop becomes the calmest soul on the Aegean Sea. The ship groans again, a deep, bending shriek of steel. Time is running out. But Violet is not leaving anyone behind. Not now. Not ever. The deck of HMHS Britannic is no longer a surface, it's a slope. A slow, groaning, tilting plane of steel pulling everything toward the bow as the great hospital ship begins to die. Spray blasts across the starboard side as lifeboats swing wildly from their davits. Officers shout over the shriek of steam escaping from ruptured pipes. The smell of oil thickens the air. Violet Jessop steadies herself with one hand on the railing while her other hand grips the stretcher. Her patient is still unconscious, bandages soaked through but breathing. "Lower away," an officer yells. A lifeboat begins its descent, but the fall is too fast. The lines scream, whipping against metal. Men inside brace themselves as the boat slams the waves, nearly capsizing. "Next boat," another officer orders. "We're running out of time." The Britannic's forward compartments are already flooded. Violet can hear the deep, gurgling roar of seawater surging upward through the ship's veins. She feels the vibrations through the deck, the pulse of a dying machine. She tightens her grip on the stretcher. "Hold him steady," she tells the orderly. He nods, knuckles white. A medic waves them forward. "This way, boat 22. The lifeboat hangs low and nearly level with the rail, perfect for loading the wounded quickly. But the ship lurches again, sending nurses, soldiers, and equipment sliding several inches toward the bow. Violet digs her heels in, teeth clenched, using her hip to brace the stretcher. The wind snaps at her veil, her apron flapping behind her like a torn flag. A private calls out to her, "Miss Jessop, are we gonna be pulled in to the propellers?" He's seen the same thing she has. At the stern, the ship's massive propellers churn violently just below the surface, still spinning as seawater rushes into engineering. Any lifeboat launched too close will be dragged into them like driftwood. Violet answers calmly, "Starboard side only, keep your eyes on me." She won't let them panic. Not when panic kills faster than any torpedo. The orderly helps her lift the stretcher into the lifeboat. Two sailors grip the rails, guiding the patient down. "Get in, Nurse Jessop," one of them shouts. She hesitates only for a moment. The ward, her remaining patients. There are still more men inside. "I'll be back," she says. "Lower away." The sailors obey, and the lifeboat descends with a screech of ropes. For a second, she watches it drift, bouncing hard on the choppy sea, its occupants rowing desperately to distance themselves from the stern's deadly pull. Then she turns back toward the interior of the ship. A young nurse grabs her arm. "Violet, where are you going?" There are still men in the ward. "But the flooding." Violet cuts her off with a look. "We're not leaving them." It isn't courage, it isn't heroism. It's duty. And it's the only thing she knows how to do. The corridor is worse now. The waterline creeps upward from the forward end, swirling with debris, splints, medicine bottles, torn canvas bandages drifting like seaweed. A soldier clings to a pipe overhead, one leg useless. "Nurse, please help me." Violet reaches him, looping his arm around her shoulder. "Lean on me, slowly." They inch toward the stairs, the deck groaning beneath them. A distant crash echoes through the ship, another collapsing bulkhead. The corridor tilts further. Water surges, icy and unforgiving, hitting Violet at the knees. The soldier gasps as the cold shocks him awake. "Don't stop," she says. "You hear me, don't stop." She drags him through the rising flood, step by dragging step. When they reach the stairwell, two orderlies pull him upward. Violet shivers, drenched now to the waist. She keeps moving. Another explosion-like crack resonates from deep inside the hull, the sound of the great ship's spine breaking. The Britannic is beginning its final descent, bow first, nose pointed into the seabed. Sunlight floods the upper decks as she emerges again. The angle is steep now, almost like walking uphill. Men tumble, sliding across the metal. A lifeboat crashes against the hull, splintering. A sailor screams, "Every boat clear, abandon ship, abandon ship." Violet grabs the nearest rail. The deck is nearly too steep to stand on. She looks toward the starboard side. Lifeboats scatter like seeds across the waves, some rowing desperately, others overturned. She has two choices: jump or be dragged down. She unties her life belt, tightens it around her waist, and whispers a quick prayer. Not for herself, for the men still fighting to survive the water. Then she steps to the rail, braces her hands, and pushes off. The fall is instant. The water slams into her like a wall, cold, crushing, blinding. She kicks upward toward the fractured sunlight. Her lungs burn, her skirt tangles around her legs. When she breaks the surface, she gasps, only to be pulled immediately backward by a powerful current. The propellers, still spinning, still pulling. Violet's ears fill with the roar of water and metal. She fights, kicks, claws at the sea. Her fingers brush something, debris, a board. She grabs it and kicks with everything she has. The suction tugs at her boots. She feels herself losing ground. One more kick. One more breath. The current loosens. She bursts free into open water, coughing, tears mixing with seawater. Behind her, the Britannic tilts fully onto her side, funnels collapsing with thunderous booms. The ocean swallows the great ship, her third sinking in 5 years. Violet floats on the waves, clinging to the board, watching as the last of the hull disappears beneath the Aegean. She is alive. Again. And she has no idea that another nurse, decades later, will share her fate. February 3, 1943, North Atlantic, 400 miles west of Ireland. Snow falls like ash over the convoy. Gray waves slam against the hull of USS Dorchester, sending freezing spray over its decks as it plows eastward. The sky is a low, leaden ceiling. The cold gnaws through wool coats, through gloves, through bone. Navy nurse Winifred quick pulls her scarf higher over her face. Her breath blooms in the air like smoke. The convoy around her creaks and groans, shadowy hulls cutting through the rough winter seas. Inside the ship, warmth doesn't exist. The wards are cramped, the air thick with diesel smoke and the damp coughs of seasick soldiers. Everything reeks: oil, wet wool, salt-soaked canvas. Winifred moves through the dim corridor with her medical satchel, checking on each patient. Frost clings to the metal railing as she grips it. Every vibration through the deck feels like a warning. She has survived one sinking already. She knows the signs. A young private, barely 19, watches her with wide, nervous eyes. "Ma'am, are we in danger?" Winifred gives him a firm nod, not reassurance but truth. Every ship in these waters is in danger, but we stay ready. That's how we survive. He swallows hard. Above them, the convoy's escorts, sleek destroyers of the U.S. Navy, slice through the waves, sonar pings echoing in the cold deep. Night falls fast, swallowing the horizon whole. Winifred had been through nights like this before, dark, freezing, tense enough to crush a person's lungs, and she knows what comes next. Because U-boats love the dark. 1:02 a.m. The ship shudders as if something giant has rammed into it. Men bolt upright in their bunks, tin cups fall to the floor, someone screams. The explosion follows a second later. A deep, horrible WHOOMPH that blows open doors and shatters glass. The deck heaves sideways, lights flicker then fail, plunging the ship into total blackness. Winifred hits the wall so hard it knocks the breath from her lungs. Her satchel skids away into the dark. Alarms begin to wail. Men pour from their bunks, tripping over each other in the pitch black, shouting, praying, crying. Someone yells, "Torpedo, torpedo port side." The first sinking all over again. Except this one is worse. The cold is immediate. The corridor fills with frigid air as seawater bursts through ruptured bulkheads. The smell of oil floods the passageway. Winifred forces herself up and shouts over the chaos. "Everyone on your feet, stay calm, move toward the ladder." Her voice is the only solid thing in the dark. She grabs two patients who can't walk and drags them between her arms. The deck is already tilting. The groaning of metal is deafening. Somewhere deeper in the ship, steam pipes rupture with a vicious hiss. Boots splash through rising seawater. The ship is dying fast. Winifred pushes her way toward the freezing night air, urging men onward, even as the angle steepens beneath her feet. When she bursts onto the deck, the world hits her in a sensory storm. Freezing wind. Black waves rising like cliffs. Destroyers firing starshells into the sky. Men shouting into the dark. And over it all, the distant, unmistakable hum of a U-boat's diesel engine slipping through the water like a predator circling wounded prey. Winifred knows she has seconds. Not minutes. Seconds. A lifeboat crew waves frantically, "Nurse, over here." But she doesn't move toward them. Not yet. Two soldiers cling to the rail, one too injured to lift himself. Winifred grabs them both by their jackets. "Hold on to me now." A wave crashes over the deck, nearly sweeping all three into the sea. Winifred's hands go numb instantly, her teeth chatter, but she pulls them step by step toward the lifeboat, boots slipping on the icy deck. Men are already jumping into the water, horrified screams echoing across the waves as the cold claims them. "Nurse," a sailor shouts, "we have to lower, get in." She shoves her two wounded men forward, "Take them first." "What about you?" "I'll be right behind, Gio." Another explosion thunders beneath the ship as the second torpedo hits. The deck lurches violently. Winifred is thrown into the rail, her ribs flare with pain. The bow plunges deeper. The stern rises. And the North Atlantic begins to pull them all under. She stumbles, grabs the edge of the lifeboat, too late. It drops. She watches it descend away in the dark, filled to the brim with wounded men she refused to abandon. Then a wall of black water sweeps across the deck. And Winifred Quick is thrown into the freezing Atlantic. The cold is a violence all its own. Her breath is ripped from her lungs, her limbs turn to stone. She fights upward, barely able to move, forced to claw her way through burning cold water. When she breaks the surface, men are screaming all around her. Debris floats, boxes, shattered planks, life jackets. The USS Dorchester groans like a dying animal, bow pointed down, stern rising high. She treads water, teeth clenched, chest heaving. This is only the first sinking she will survive. And it will not be the last. The USS Dorchester disappears beneath the waves in less than 20 minutes. When the final boom echoes across the water, Winifred Quick is a speck in a freezing, violent ocean, surrounded by floating men, oil slicks, burning debris, and the terrible silence that follows a ship's death. Wind rips across the black surface, ice forms at the corners of her eyelashes. She hears someone shouting, "Hold on, grab the rope." A piece of wreckage bumps her shoulder. She turns and sees a half-swamped liferaft drifting close, its canvas sides torn, its ropes frayed but afloat. Barely. Inside, a handful of soldiers cling to life. Frostbite is already turning their fingers pale. Their breath comes in ragged gasps. Winifred kicks toward them, the cold stabbing her legs like knives. A soldier reaches out, arm trembling. "Nurse Quick, is that you?" She grabs his forearm. The cold is so intense she feels nothing, only pressure. "Hold on, pull with me." Together, they haul her over the lip of the raft. Pain shoots through her chest as she collapses inside, every breath like swallowing glass. Her soaked uniform clings to her skin, freezing instantly in the wind. The raft rises, then drops violently on the waves. Water sloshes in the bottom. A soldier scoops it out with his helmet. Another man, shaking uncontrollably, whispers, they're not coming back for us. A distant destroyer from the U.S. Navy flashes a searchlight across the swells, but it passes too far away. The convoy is still under threat, U-boats lurking beneath. Winifred forces herself upright, clutching the side of the raft for balance. They'll circle back, stay awake, stay focused. But she knows what the North Atlantic does to the human body. She's seen it, felt it, survived it. Hours pass. The cold becomes a second skin, heavy, burning, numbing. Soldiers slump forward, drifting in and out of consciousness. Winifred moves between them, slapping cheeks lightly, checking pulses, forcing frostbitten hands to stay moving. Keep talking, she orders. Tell me your name, where you grew up. Some answer, some don't. She leans toward a private whose lips are turning blue. Stay with me, look at me. His eyes flutter. My mother, she said the sea was beautiful. It is, Winifred whispers, and you'll see it again in daylight. He nods weakly. Another wave hits the raft, nearly flipping it. Winifred braces her arms against the canvas wall. Water pours in, soaking everyone's legs in freezing brine. She feels her own consciousness drifting, the cold whispering invitations to sleep. But she forces herself awake. Sleep is death out here. Dawn arrives as a gray smear on the horizon. No warmth, no comfort. The men look almost colorless, faces waxy, eyes hollow. Winifred's lips are cracked and bleeding, her fingers won't bend, but she keeps checking on each soldier, moving mechanically, her body operating on stubborn will. A distant engine rumbles across the waves. One soldier tilts his head, voice cracking, is that one of ours? Winifred squints through frozen lashes. For a moment, just a moment, she sees hope. A cutter moving across the horizon, searching, scanning. Wave your arms, she shouts. The men try, some can't lift their hands. Winifred drags herself to the edge of the raft and raises both arms, shaking them wildly. But the cutter turns. The sound fades. Her heart sinks, but she doesn't show it. Keep moving, she tells them quietly, they'll come. Night falls again. Snow begins to fall, soft at first, then heavier, turning the raft into a drifting coffin of ice. A corporal beside her stops, shivering. Winifred knows what that means. She places her hand on his shoulder and whispers the Navy prayer under her breath. Another man, delirious, tries to stand. She grabs him, pulling him back down. Stay in the raft, you hear me, stay. He sobs into his frozen hands. Time becomes meaningless, just the shock of cold, the rise and fall of waves, the sound of her own breathing. Her mind wanders to the stories she heard as a child of sailors lost at sea, of the ocean claiming men whole. She thinks of the nurses before her, like Violet Jessop, who faced death again and again and refused to yield. She wonders if she will meet the same fate. The 36th hour. The world has narrowed to white sky and black water. Then a sound. Low, mechanical, growing louder. Winifred's eyes open with a jolt of raw instinct. Wake up, she croaks, shaking the nearest soldier. Wake up, they're here. A silhouette forms through the fog, a cutter moving straight toward them. Men stir, some cry, some simply stare, too weak to react. Winifred forces her frozen arms upward one last time. A whistle blasts across the water. A voice shouts through a megaphone. Hold on, we see you. Relief hits her so hard she nearly collapses. The rescue team hauls them aboard one by one, warm blankets, hot drinks, human hands. When they pull Winifred up, she finally lets her body sag into their grip. Ma'am, a sailor says, eyes wide, how did you keep them alive? Winifred tries to answer, but her throat tightens. She simply looks back at the drifting raft, half frozen, half flooded, and whispers, I couldn't leave them. Just like Violet. Just like every nurse who ran into danger when everyone else ran away from it. And this will not be Winifred Quick's last sinking. Not even close. August 17, 1943, Bay of Biscay. The sun beats down on the open deck of the USS LSD-203, warming steel plates and drying the salt spray left by a restless sea. To anyone watching, it looks like an uneventful afternoon: blue sky, calm water, the gentle thrum of engines as the convoy creeps toward the English coast. Winifred Quick stands near the bow, wind brushing strands of hair from her face. 6 months have passed since the loss of the USS Dorchester, and she still wakes in the middle of the night tasting saltwater in her throat. But today, her focus is the row of wounded men on stretchers behind her, some bandaged across the chest, others missing limbs, all loaded aboard for evacuation back to Britain. Winifred checks their blankets, water canteens, and morphine doses with swift, precise movements. A corpsman approaches, notebook in hand. "Ma'am, the captain says sea conditions are good, no U-boat reports in the last 2 days." Winifred gives him a level look. "I've heard that before." He swallows. "Yes, ma'am." She steps to the rail, scanning the water. It's too calm, like glass, reflecting the sky in soft ripples. Her instincts itch. She survived the first sinking because she listened to her gut. Now her gut screams that something is wrong. 1903 hours. A lookout shouts from the mast. Periscope off the port bow. The calm shatters. Alarms blare across the deck. Men rush to stations, some limping, some dragging themselves with crutches. Officers shout orders over the roar of scrambling boots. Winifred stiffens, adrenaline spiking. She turns toward the wounded just as the first torpedo's wake cuts a long, white scar across the water, headed straight for them. She screams, "Hold tight." The explosion hits beneath the hull in a deafening eruption of water and metal. The deck lurches upward, then slams downward, throwing men off their feet. A fireball erupts from the midsection, shooting flames into the sky. Chunks of steel rain down. The blast knocks Winifred sideways, slamming her shoulder into a bulkhead. She fights the pain and pushes herself upright. Her ears ring, smoke fills the air, someone is crying out for a corpsman. Worse, someone else calls for her. "Nurse, quick, we've got wounded pinned." She runs toward the cry. The inside of the troop compartment is a hellscape, sparks bursting from ripped electrical cables, water rushing across the floor from ruptured pipes, the smell of burned fuel choking the air. 2 soldiers lie trapped under a collapsed beam. Another man is trying to lift it but lacks the strength. Winifred drops to her knees beside him. "On 3, lift with your legs." They heave, the beam rises just enough for the trapped men to crawl out, groaning, bleeding, barely conscious. "Get them topside," she commands. Then she hears it, a second torpedo inbound. The bow lookout screams, "She's coming in again." Winifred grabs the 2 nearest wounded and pulls them toward the ladder. The second explosion tears through the rear of the ship, blasting open the bulkhead. A wall of seawater crashes through, sweeping gear, crates, and men into the corridor. The ship begins to list rapidly, 5 degrees 10:15. Winifred grips a railing as seawater surges over her boots. A sailor shouts over the chaos, "Abandon ship, abandon ship." She turns to the wounded, "Move, crawl if you have to." They stumble up the ladder, one by one. Winifred pushes from behind, forcing them upward, refusing to let anyone fall back into the flooding compartment. The list grows worse, the engine groans to a halt. Waves slam the outer hull. And above it all, Winifred hears a familiar sound. A lifeboat davit creaking under weight, men scrambling, officers shouting that the list is too steep, a panic she has lived through before. 3 times now. She reaches the deck and the world is chaos. Lifeboats swing dangerously. A fire rages near the stern, men plunge into the water, swimming through burning oil. The smell of diesel and seawater mixes into an acrid haze. A sailor grabs Winifred's arm. "Ma'am, you need to get off while you can. Not until the wounded are clear." She points toward a group of stretchers, sailors hoist them toward the rail. The ship groans, it's the sound of structural failure. Winifred's instincts flare again. Get them over now, she shouts, jump if you have to. She grabs one wounded soldier by the jacket and leaps with him as the deck tilts sharply. The ocean rushes up to meet them. Cold, even in summer, hits like a hammer. When she surfaces, coughing oil and seawater, she sees the USS LSD-203 sinking stern first, its bow lifting like a dying animal. She kicks toward a floating piece of debris, pulling the wounded soldier with her. His head lolls, but he breathes. Around her, the sea is filled with struggling men, burning patches of fuel, overturned lifeboats, and flashes of gunfire from an escorting destroyer firing depth charges at the lurking U-boat. Winifred holds the soldier's head above water and shouts at a passing raft. Take HIM now. Two sailors haul the man aboard. One reaches out to her, ma'am, grab hold. She shakes her head, help the others first. She turns toward another cry, a soldier barely staying afloat. She swims to him through the oil-slicked waves. Her arms burn, her lungs ache, but she keeps going. Because this is who she is. Because nurses don't abandon the wounded, not on land, not in the sky, not in the sea. Not ever. The Atlantic rolls beneath her, black and endless. Another sinking. Another near death. Another day of saving lives when her own hangs by a thread. Winifred Quick will survive again. But the war isn't finished with her yet. January 12, 1944, Mediterranean Sea, near Naples. Dawn breaks in thin strips of gold across the deck of the USS St. Augustine, painting long shadows over coils of rope, depth charge racks, and the rows of wounded men bundled against the winter chill. The smell of brine mixes with diesel fumes as the ship cuts steadily north along the Italian coast. Winifred Quick rubs her hands together, warming stiff fingers inside her gloves. Her uniform is salt-stained and faded from months at sea. She has survived 2 sinkings, one in the frozen Atlantic, one in burning oil and fire, and yet she stands here again. Because the wounded still need her. A young corpsman approaches with a clipboard. Nurse Quick, the captain says we'll be in port by nightfall. Enemy subs haven't hit this lane in weeks. Winifred gives him a thin, weary smile. That's what they always say just before things go to hell. He hesitates. You really think we'll be attacked again? She looks out across the calm Mediterranean, the deceptive gentleness of the water. Her voice is low, steady. I don't think I know. Her instincts had saved her twice. They had never failed her. And today they scream louder than ever. 1742 hours. The calm ends with a shattering crack. Metal shrieks along the hull. The impact throws Winifred off her feet, knocking her into the rail. Multiple soldiers collapse as the deck jerks violently beneath them. A lookout screams. Collision starboard side, we've been rammed. Through the smoke and splintering steel, Winifred glimpses the massive gray bow of a convoy ship, the USS Polk, its helm swung too wide in a sudden evasive maneuver. It plows into the smaller St. Augustine like a battering ram. The deck buckles, men are hurled like rag dolls. Winifred drags herself upright as a second impact rips open the hull. Freezing seawater gushes in below decks. Alarms blast. Officers shout to seal compartments, but it's too late. The ship is mortally wounded. Smoke floods the air. A corpsman limps toward her. Ma'am, we're taking water fast. We need to move the wounded. Then move them, she shouts, already sprinting. Inside the main compartment, chaos reigns. The floor tilts sharply as water rushes in through a jagged tear in the hull. Stretchers slide across the deck. A lantern smashes against a wall, plunging the room into dim red emergency lighting. Winifred grabs the nearest stretcher handle. You help me lift him. A sailor joins her, muscles straining. Another explosion-like groan shakes the ship, metal tears somewhere deep below. Water climbs from ankle to knee height in seconds. A soldier flails as the rising sea reaches his chest. And nurse, please don't leave me. Winifred drops to him, grabs his collar, and hauls him upward with every ounce of strength left in her. Hold on to me, she orders. They fight through the flooding passage, water dragging like hands around their legs. A fallen beam blocks the way. Winifred wedges her shoulder under it, shoving it aside with a cry of pain. The man stumbles but keeps moving. They reach the ladder to the upper deck. Wounded men jam the narrow space, pushing upward in desperation. "Make room," Winifred shouts. "He can't walk, move." Sailors shift just enough for her to heave the soldier upward. Two hands reach down, pulling him to safety. She grabs the next stretcher. And the next. And the next. Her arms burn, her lungs scream for air. Oil and seawater soak her uniform, but she doesn't stop. Not while any man is still breathing. 1756 hours. The St. Augustine is nearly underwater. Winifred reaches the deck just as the bow dips beneath the surface. Men jump, some slipping on the tilted steel, others dragged by the suction. Lifeboats are torn from their davits by the angle. A senior officer shouts, "Abandon ship, everyone into the water." A wave crashes over the bow, sweeping bodies into the sea. Winifred grabs two wounded soldiers by their jackets. "You're with me, hold on tight." "But we can't swim," one cries. "Then hold on and don't let go." The ship groans, a long, deathly creak of metal folding in on itself. Winifred pushes the soldiers toward the rail and jumps with them as the deck tilts past 40 degrees. The Mediterranean engulfs them. Cold, immediate, crushing. Winifred surfaces coughing, her arms thrashing for the two wounded men. She finds one, pulls him close. The other is drifting. She kicks hard, reaching him, grabbing his sleeve just before a wave can take him under. Behind her, the St. Augustine slips beneath the waves, stern rising one last time before disappearing in a roar of bubbles. Silence follows, broken only by the slap of waves and the cries of survivors. Winifred clings to a floating plank, pulling both wounded men against it. "Stay awake," she whispers, voice cracking. "Stay with me, both of you." An escort ship maneuvers through the debris. Searchlights sweep across the water. A sailor shouts from the deck. "They're survivors off the port side." Winifred feels strong arms lift the first wounded man, then the second. A hand reaches for her. She finally lets herself be pulled aboard. The sailor looks at her, stunned. "Ma'am, you were out there holding two grown men, you saved them." Winifred's voice is a hoarse whisper. "It's my duty." Then she collapses against the bulkhead, exhausted. Winifred Quick survived 3 sinkings in the span of a single year. Just like Violet Jessop a generation earlier, she endured terror, fire, freezing seas, and the crushing weight of steel and water, all without leaving her wounded behind. 2 nurses. 2 wars. 2 women who should have died a dozen times. But didn't. Because others needed them to live.